So I'm going to go ahead and go over numbers 4 and 5 from The Story of My Life by Helen Keller. We'd previously done 1 through 3, and you were to do 4 and 5 on your own. I want to go over them so that if you got any of the items wrong, you knew why your answers were wrong and understood the best why the other choices were correct. A couple things you're going to notice as I scroll through. The things that we underlined in pencil, or that things that we had written in pencil, I changed to blue so they would pop out. So we would remember, oh yeah, those are the things we added or the textual evidence that we found. And all of the other answers that were correct, I bolded. All right, so that they would pop out as we went over them. We're not going to go back to those other answers, but I just wanted you to know if you noticed that as we scrolled through. Also, something else I'm going to do, I haven't been successful with using the Adobe Acrobat editing tools, so I'm just going to highlight answers that I'm crossing off. So what you're going to see is something like this. When I make a yellow dot, okay, something like that, that means the answer is incorrect. So I'm going to use that tool for this until I figure out how to use this better. So the two questions that you guys were to do on your own were number 4, which statement best contributes to the central idea of the text? And number 5, which are 2 central ideas of the passage? Now, 5 asks me for the central ideas and 4 asks me for a detail that supports that. I'm going to go ahead and do 5 first, because in order for me to figure out which detail supports the central idea, I need to know what the central ideas are. Watch out for that. When you're taking tests, just because items come in numerical order does not mean you have to do them in that order. So sometimes you might find something later on in the test that helps you answer something earlier on in the test. So just look out for those things. So number 5 says, which are 2 central ideas of the passage? A, Helen Keller's mother was an excellent teacher. B, Helen Keller did her best to communicate with others. C, a long illness like Helen Keller's requires a long recovery. D, communication was very difficult for Helen as a child. And E, Helen Keller was able to realize she was different from other people. So when I go back to what we said the passage was about, we said that this was about Helen's experience being deaf and blind as a child. So this whole thing focused on and gave us examples of what it was like for her as a child to be deaf and blind, and her struggle to communicate and some of the frustration she had with that. I'm going to skim over the passage, and as I'm looking over this, one of my choices asked me something about her mother was a great teacher. The only thing it says about her mother is her mother succeeded in helping her understand a good deal. It doesn't say that she was an excellent teacher. It tells us up here she had a teacher, Annie Sullivan, who came and helped her master Braille by 10, but there's nothing here that indicates her mother was an excellent teacher. Also, when I look at her illness, it just says at 19 months she suffered a severe illness. It doesn't say that went on forever and ever. So because of that information from the passage and just skimming and scanning, I know, whoops, sorry about that. I know for number 5 that her mother being an excellent teacher is not going to be an answer, and that a long illness like hers requires a long recovery. Those have nothing to do with the central idea. What we said this was about was her difficulties and her wanting to, her being a deaf and blind child and her struggles and her efforts to communicate. So as I look over these last 3 choices, I have Helen Keller did her best to communicate with others. Communication was difficult for Helen Keller as a child, and Helen Keller was able to realize she was different from other people. She did realize she was different from other people. However, when I skim and scan my passage again, the common things that keep popping up are not that she was different, it's her effort to communicate. She says here, right when she was a baby struggling, my hands felt every object. I observed every motion. So she was learning, she was trying to communicate by touch. I felt some need of communication. She did go and push. And she keeps kind of talking about that. So the common themes are that she wanted to communicate and she had some struggles with it. The fact that she struggled, that she realized she was different is just a detail. So I'm going to cross this off. So the answer for this, the 2 central ideas are that she did her best to communicate with others, and communication was difficult for her as a child. And those were some common themes that kept coming up in each of those paragraphs. So now that I've isolated those two answers, I can go back to number 4 and find the best statement that contributes. So we have Helen desired to communicate with others as a child. Okay, well, she did her best to communicate. It was difficult. That might be a possibility. She realized she was deaf and blind prior to working with her teacher. That doesn't really support that she did her best to communicate or that communication was difficult. So I'm going to cross that one off. Helen knew her mother and aunt were going out by the way they dressed. That has nothing to do with it, and I know we're going to cross that off. And then we have D. Helen grew frustrated after numerous attempts to communicate and understand others. So out of these two, which is going to be the best statement that contributes to the fact that she did her best to communicate and she was able to realize she was different from other people? That's going to be D. Okay, we already know that she did her best to communicate with others. Something that contributes to this central idea was her frustration, because we would not have understood how difficult it was for her to be a deaf and blind child. That experience wouldn't have been as vivid for us if she didn't explain her frustration. And she kept talking about that she would throw fits and that, she noticed she used signs other people didn't. So the best answer for that was D. Okay, thank you. Go ahead and finish your sheet, and I will come around and collect it in a little bit.